Hello my friends, and welcome back. Also, if this is your first time here, then welcome. Today I'm going to be telling you all about a series that has completely reignited my love for anime. This series is known as Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is a fantasy adventure anime where we follow Frieren, an elven mage, as she embarks on a new adventure as she learns to cope with grief and strives to learn more about human emotions and perspectives. This anime is made by Madhouse Studios, who are also responsible for works such as Death Note and Perfect Blue, which are two really good series. We start the story after the end of the Demon King War, a war that has plagued the land of Iade for over a millennia. This war was waged by the demon race, who are under the command of the Demon King. The demons waged war on every race throughout the continent, although the elves suffered loss more than any other in this war. Whole elven villages were wiped out in the blink of an eye, sending the race spiraling into the possibility and perhaps the sad inevitability of their extinction. It was in one of these villages, however, where a young elven girl was found. This elven girl was called Frieren. Little did she or the Demon King realise that she would be instrumental in bringing an end to his tyranny. As it would happen, she was not alone in this endeavour. She was joined by 3 others, and they would come to be known as Himmel the Hero, Haita the Priest, and finally Aizen the Warrior. Together the 4 would be known as the Heroes Party. They would embark on a decade-long journey, and ultimately their efforts would pay off. With the defeat and the presumed death of the Demon King and the scattering of his remaining forces, the war that had plagued the land for over a millennia could finally come to its end. We follow the 4 heroes as they return home, celebrated and praised by the people of the realm. However, with their shared goal now accomplished, and with Himmel, Haita and Aizen realising all they want is a life of normalcy and peace after this decade-long adventure, they all decide to go their separate ways. Before they do, they have one last party together to celebrate their victory. Savouring the end of their time together, they watch the Era Meteor Shower, an event which happens every 50 years. Promising that they would reunite the next time the Era Meteor Shower happens, Frieren says the next time they see each other, she will take them to a place where they can better view the event. We see the next 50 years pass in a blink of an eye through Frieren's perspective, seeing the world age around her as she stays the same. When the time comes to reunite with her old companions, she is shocked to see how much they have all changed. Seeing her companions, who were once youthful and energetic, who are now old and who will eventually die, really serves as a shock to Frieren. It makes her realise the difference in their lifespans, and while to her 50 years seems like a short and negligible amount of time, to her old companions that time was quite literally the rest of their lives. Keeping true to her word, Frieren takes them to a spot where they can all appreciate the true beauty of the Era Meteor Shower. Sadly, this moment of happiness wouldn't last, as surrounded by his old friends and finally being able to see Frieren, the woman who he loved more than anything, Himmel the Hero passes on peacefully, surrounded by the people who he considered his greatest companions and his closest friends. At Himmel's funeral, whilst not initially showing much emotion at first, Frieren changes when Himmel's casket is being lowered into the ground. She simply breaks down into a fit of tears. This is because she realised she never truly got to know Himmel. She never learned to cherish that time she had with him or learn to appreciate him for who he was. And now simply, she will never get that chance to again. Himmel's death makes her realise she truly doesn't understand humanity. This realisation is the push she needs to learn and understand more about humanity. Now, before we continue, my loyal subscribers, let me tell you about a weird experience I had the other day. So, I was walking home when suddenly a UFO crashed in front of me. Approached the craft with caution when suddenly aliens exited holding something red. They told me it was the mythical subscribe button, and that all of you currently watching this video should subscribe. And if you don't, a UFO will appear outside your window tonight. I know, because I'll be the one flying it. In this section, I'm going to split the characters into 2 groups, the Heroes Party and Frieren's current companions. So, let's start with the Heroes Party. I honestly love all 4 of these characters. Their dynamics with each other are genuinely really strong, and it goes to show the depth of the bond these 4 have. Obviously, with Frieren being the main character, we see her most, and genuinely seeing her change and evolve over time is very gratifying and is honestly just so worth it. With Himmel, Haita and Aizen, it is a bit different, as we mainly see these 3 through flashbacks, especially Himmel and to a lesser extent Haita. Seeing Himmel through the flashbacks whenever Frieren thinks back to their time together really highlights what kind of a man he was. Himmel is consistently portrayed as only ever wanting to do good, hence why their journey took them 10 years, as they kept getting sidetracked helping people, and it honestly just makes him a really compelling and lovable character. Even though he's shown mainly through the flashbacks, he is still one of my favourite characters in the show. With Haita, he shows throughout the series that what he wants to do is leave a positive impact on the world, and I think one of Haita's biggest impacts he left on the world was adopting and raising an orphan girl named Fern. He did this after her family were killed and he became her adopted father figure, and this to me just highlights that under the imperfection that Haita sometimes has, his heart was always in the right place, and even though he achieved this goal of leaving an impact on the world, I think it is safe to say that those he impacted the most through his actions were the common people he met, and especially his companions. For me personally, I think Eisen is the one closest to potentially understanding Frieren's perspective on time, because as a dwarf, he lives longer than humans but not as long as elves, so he's kind of the middle ground between the two, which personally I find really interesting. Another thing that I love about Eisen is that he's always consciously aware of his limitations and does act on that accordingly. For instance, when Frieren invites him on a new journey, he declines, not because he's afraid of fighting, but because he knows in his old age he won't be of much use as he once was. He also takes on an apprentice of his own, a young boy called Stark, who he sees himself in. And this is another thing I genuinely really love about this series, the sense that the old guard is passing the torch to the newer generations, which is honestly one of my favourite tropes in all of fiction just ever. And seeing it in this series and how it's executed is genuinely really amazing. I'm very quickly just going to go over Fern and Stark because I genuinely cannot recommend enough that you go and watch this show, but only after you finish watching this video. Fern, as I mentioned before, was an orphaned girl who was taken in by Haita. She lived with him for many years, and eventually when he started getting old and was near death, he was really worried about what would happen to Fern. And knowing the untapped potential she holds as a mage, Haita tricks Frieren into taking her as an apprentice. Fern is like Frieren in many ways, stoic and serious, but she also holds a great amount of respect for Frieren, viewing her as a mother figure. She grows a lot under Frieren's tutelage and genuinely does become a solid mage in her own right. In a way, she also changes Frieren too. Because of Fern, Frieren starts learning not to take the time of others for granted anymore, and she changes her ways out of the care for her apprentice, which I honestly just love to see. Now, with Stark, I love him because he is honestly very relatable. He's kind of like the Usopp character of Frieren. I mean, with monsters like this, I'd also be a bit of a coward. All jokes aside, I really do like how we see his courage develop over the series, with him first fighting a dragon to save a village, to eventually fighting demons to protect a whole city. And overall, he is a really solid character and one of my all-time favourites. The final thing I'm going to touch on today is the main theme of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and that theme is appreciating the value of life. Appreciating life is central to the show for many reasons. The biggest in my opinion though, is how it changes Frieren. At the beginning of the show, we see how Frieren has this almost indifference to life around her, and that is ultimately because as an elf, she knows that she has a long lifespan, and to her it makes the lives of those around her seem fleeting and insignificant. Although she would eventually come to regret these feelings, by the time she did, it was simply too late. As the series goes on though, we genuinely see her start to change her view of life. She realises that life is all about living in the moment and experiencing all the joy and even the heartbreak of life. She starts to appreciate the time and lives of those around her, be that Fern, Stark, or any of the other people she meets along the way. And this is why I believe this theme is intrinsically intertwined with Frieren's character and her journey that she makes throughout the show. Finally, before I go, I want to leave you with some advice, and it's this. If you're feeling uncertain about whether or not you should do things, I think you should, because otherwise you will live with the regret of not doing them. Go out there, get that coffee, meet up with your friends, and just appreciate the life we have.